Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I have with me Zachary Parker Harris as my guest. And let me tell you about Zachary Parker Harris. Parker started his career landing his dream job, working for a Fortune 100 technology company doing operations and strategy. After getting to know the executives there, he asked the advice they gave their children, and he realized he must choose a different path. He started a mastermind modeled after Benjamin Franklin that over time became his business and mission. Today, he leads Junto Global, which has served thousands of entrepreneurs to connect like-minded peers and build relationships, health, and business they deeply desire. I chose for the theme today, what successful entrepreneurs do differently. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Parker Harris. Parker, what successful entrepreneurs do differently definitely caught my attention. After the pandemic, there's so many of us that became entrepreneurs and are just trying to figure out the path that we should take. So I'm sure the audience will be very interested in what you have to say. But first, we start with that easy first question of where do you live? Where do you call home?
So my wife and I are actually traveling the world for 2 years. So we're living in a new city every month. So home is a fluid concept for us at the moment.
That is so cool. I have interviewed quite a few people that are nomads, if you will. And I guess if I didn't have two grand boys, I would be right there with you because I just love to travel the world. So that's very cool. I'll live vicariously through you. So we talked about how life changed. Before we kind of get into the meat of this, I want you to just think back at that moment and really what was that defining, I think I have to do things differently.
Yeah, I think for me, there was like a bunch of different reference points or, a bunch of things happening at once that converged to making this decision of getting off the corporate ladder and taking a different path. I'm someone that reads a lot of books and sought out a lot of mentors and likes to consume a lot of information online. And I remember, talking with some executives that had the positions at the company that I thought that I'd want to have, and learning about what they did on a daily basis, and how much they enjoyed what they did on a daily basis, and
or not.
Yeah, and just realizing like there's tens of thousands of people competing for a position that people that have the position don't even want, and then. I remember going to the beach. I lived in San Diego at the time and went to the beach one evening and was just sitting on a bench looking out on the ocean. And I saw my life if I stayed on the path that I was on, and it would be very comfortable and very safe and like a good life. And I realized like I just couldn't stay on that path, that I had to take the path less traveled and really strive for a great or extraordinary life with the one life that I had. And so in that moment, I realized I was going to have to make some hard decisions, and it felt like a life or death life or death decision at the time, and it really forced me to make things work and figure out the strategy and the business model and build the relationships that ultimately would lead to success.
So good. I think some of my best decisions are sitting in front of the ocean.
Yeah, there's a power in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in your definition, what is a mastermind?
A mastermind is two or more minds coming together in the spirit of harmony to accomplish a common goal.
One of the bosses that I had whenever I first became a project manager years ago said, "Oh, we're just going to have one brain in this room." I was like, I think that's what he was trying to talk about, a mastermind. But he's like, "We're just going to have one brain," and all of us kind of looked at him like, "Whose?" We don't know what's going on. It's not going to be mine. It was interesting.
Well,
What?
it's interesting. Like I think that most people get to experience a mastermind at some point in their life with their significant other, with their husband or wife,
Yeah.
and that's usually the only mastermind people get to really like leverage and experience the benefits of. Sometimes those relationships at a certain point will lack harmony. So they're not forever relationships. But I think people that are successful in whatever area of life they're successful in, whether it's their health, whether it's their relationships, whether it's their business or personal development, there's often a mastermind or a success team built around that, and also a community. So I find that personal development is not an individual journey, but it involves other people.
Yeah, so true. And when you're on this journey, you have questions that come up. You don't have all the answers, and it is helpful to be able to have that community to share your ideas and thoughts and worries and questions with, and so I find masterminds are a great tool to have. So what mental models are useful for entrepreneurs today?
I think it evolves over time depending on the situation they're in. I remember the first mental model I learned was from Stephen Covey in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He has this mental model around circle of influence versus circle of concern, and the fact that successful people spend 80 or 90% of their time in their circle of influence, and unsuccessful people spend 80 or 90% of their time in their circle of concern. I think with the news and the noise that is, social media and YouTube and the internet and television, there's a lot of energy put on having us focus on our circle of concern versus our actual circle of influence. So that's one that I go back to a lot. One that changed my life was also Viktor Frankl's. I'm not sure it was Viktor Frankl now that I think about it, but it was the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it was Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he has a journey around human needs, and starting with more survival level needs, and then success level needs, and then self-actualization and transcendent level needs. And I think what's interesting about frameworks is they stack on top of each other really well. So if you think of even circle of influence and circle of concern and stack that over Maslow's, it creates this like geometric understanding of maybe where to focus my time and my energy. The more that I've explored mental models and frameworks, I've realized that really smart people will spend, a decade to multiple decades of their life answering a question, a very difficult question that's important to them. People like Jim Collins and Malcolm Gladwell. And after they invest that time and energy to answer that question, they'll normally come up with a mental model to help answer that question.
And I think the interesting thing too is that a lot of the people that are successful need to share those models, those frameworks with others, because they want to give back. And I think that's true sign of a good leader.
Yeah, I think of myself as being able to stand on the shoulders of giants, and someone that I respect is Charlie Munger, who's
Mm,
Warren Buffett's business partner, and he's written a book called Poor Charlie's Almanac that synthesizes a lot of frameworks and mental models that has been important for him. And so, I think one of the hardest parts is actually applying the mental model. Like, it's one thing to intellectually understand it, and there's another
mm.
part of it of actually applying it in a way that creates the results we're looking for in life.
And I think a lot of those models and frameworks, the piece that sometimes is missing is the consistency. As you say, you can visualize it, you can think about it, but until you start acting consistently doing it, it's not going to really take hold.
Yeah, I mean, consistency is everything, and I think the attention span that most people have is seconds,
Mm,
minutes. Maybe if it's a movie, it's an hour and a half or 2 hours, but building a business, building a life, building a relationship, building body health, those type of things, we're talking about years,
mm,
decades, of consistency, and being able to have that level of focus and consistency is in itself a competitive advantage.
right. So, how can someone prepare to be an entrepreneur early on? I said, a lot of us after COVID or just prior to COVID decided to change our careers, our lives, and be dip our toes into the world of entrepreneurship. But I don't know that everybody did it with any strategy or preparation in mind. So how can you really prepare to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah. First thing that comes to mind is getting the financial house in order, like starting to think like an entrepreneur from a financial standpoint, understanding the P&Ls that we already have, the income statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement, and you know not put myself in, not put ourselves in a situation where we're in a massive amount of debt and we have to make decisions from this like scarcity place of like the next, week or the next month versus, entrepreneurship is again about thinking more long term. Um, there's a Actually, it's a board game called Getting Out of the Rat Race by Guy Kawasaki, the Rich Dad Poor Dad author. I heard that he actually built the game first and then wrote the book to market the game. But but basically the board game is creating our own like a income statement, a balance sheet, and a cash flow statement, and applying that to an individual level. And I think that is a lesson I wish school taught people
Yeah,
more,
yeah.
of actually like making it less theoretical around like a company, but making it about like the individual, because we all have that, whether we know it or not.
Hmm.
Um, and one thing that came to me from the situation my parents put me in was I was forced, and I got the opportunity to add value to other people at a young age, whether it was just mowing lawns or washing cars or helping people do things that they didn't want to do, and so they would pay me to do it. And I learned to enjoy adding value to others. And I think that that's something that entrepreneurship is essentially adding value to others and
Mm,
capturing, part of that value by getting paid on it. And I think it can be very difficult to do consistently, um, if there's not an enjoyment from that.
mm,
Um, I would also say learning to think accurately is a really
mm,
interesting part of the entrepreneurial journey. Um, and part of thinking accurately to me is solving the right problems at the right times. There's so
mm,
many different problems in business, and a lot of times I think people are like focused on the wrong things at the wrong time, and really getting good at like measuring the data of like what it is I'm actually doing every day and what are the results of that. Having a strategy, like a clear
mm,
strategy of selling the right person, the right thing at the right price with the right positioning in a way that can scale. Really being able to execute. I think there's this element of business and personal development where in business it's called execution, and on the personal development side it's called discipline and habits. So really building the habits of success starts, in my opinion, before business, but business is really a forcing function that requires that discipline and habits, consistent habits that lead to execution of the strategy. And I find that entrepreneurship is also a very humbling journey.
Yeah.
Any preconceived notion that someone else owes me anything was thrown out the window in the entrepreneurial journey, where it's entrepreneurship. It's all about everybody else. Like it's not about me as the entrepreneur. It's about the customer. It's about the employee. It's about really everybody else. And I think that journey of, that humble pie, if you will, is an evolving, creates an evolution in the individual that is incredibly powerful over time. Because when we see things from other people's point of view versus our own point of view, there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah. I know whenever I work with people to improve their message and their public speaking, that's one of the first things that I notice with a lot of folks is their pitch or their presentation is I. And it should be you or we at the most, but to understand that you need the person that's listening to you to see themselves in that situation, in that solution, in that problem. So
yeah, I heard it said once, Vicki, that like as an entrepreneur, we're not Luke Skywalker. Like we're not the person that saves the universe. We're Yoda. We're the person that empowers the customer to be, the hero.
I love that. So how does the entrepreneur identify if there's a bottleneck in their business that they're stuck and they don't know why?
Well, there's always a bottleneck, whether it's, unless we have infinite amount of money and time, which I don't think really anybody does. So I would say it starts with data, again, like keeping track of essentially the key metrics in the customer journey. Whether, it starts, I think, with the lead side of it, like when does someone hear about the business, people going to the website, right? Or going to our LinkedIn profile, clicking on the application, or, checking the product out into the shopping cart, making that purchase, getting value from that purchase, referring that product or service to other people. There's a lot of different ways of looking at this value chain or this customer journey, and identifying what, ways to measure that journey, and looking at it over time and seeing, where, if I put my energy towards, whether it's time or money, would create the most amount of leverage or like the biggest impact. So, I think there's a lot of great content on this by people like Alex Hermosi, and I've worked with some business coaches that helped me apply that to my own business. I think for most people, for most businesses, the bottleneck is the entrepreneur, is the person. A lot of times there's a strategy or tactic with the business, or there's something around a limiting belief, a limiting behavior. So I think it starts with the data piece as well, and then having a rhythm of reflecting on what happened. What did we think was going to happen, and what was the delta, and how do we close that gap?
Yeah, it goes back to my days as project manager, and the first thing I ever did was, before I started, was in the information gathering piece, I would do process mapping, because when you walk them through the process, they saw the opportunities, saw the gaps more clearly than if you just kind of just ask well, let's get started, let's go, which oftentimes people wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that's like thinking accurately again, right?
Yeah,
With
it
that
goes back to
process
that.
mapping. And then, solving the right problem at the right time. I
Yeah,
think that a lot of times people just want to solve a problem, and it's like, well,
yeah,
let's make sure we're solving the right problem. Like, what
yeah.
problem are we actually trying to solve here before we start coming up with ideas and implementing solutions? And is this the problem that's going to create the most amount of results?
Yeah,
Because often I think people feel comfortable in their area of strength, and often the bottleneck is created outside of that.
yeah. Which leads me nicely to my next question, how personal development is important to your business's success. And pushing yourself outside of that comfort zone, which means that there are opportunities for failure coming. And how can personal development ease that? Not eliminate it, but ease that.
Yeah, I think personal development is the foundation for success in business, is the foundation
Yeah.
for success even in relationships, in health. Like, I think it's the foundation for the success in the other areas of life. And therefore, I think it's important to define what personal development is. And one of the things that I've done on my journey is to create a framework or a mental model to really understand what personal development is. And I think it starts with having a growth mindset, like a mindset where we believe that we can overcome challenges and things aren't just the way that they are, which is like a static mindset. I think from there's an opportunity to set targets, to be definite about what we're striving for. And then that gives us a plan. And then, like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
And then I
How do you
think,
pivot?
yeah, and what are the tools to deal with those punches and those triggers without hiding, numbing, and escaping them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so then I think we start getting to this interesting aspect of identity. Like, where does identity fall into an entrepreneurship journey? And from there, like, we're getting really clear on like the why. Like, Simon Sinek really has made that famous. And what is the purpose? What is the mission? What is the why? And then from there, I think taking ownership of our space is part of personal development that gets the least amount of attention. And I think that becomes a bottleneck for a lot of people. And in today's day and age, we have our physical space, we have our inner space, we also have our digital space. So it's these different levels of space, and taking ownership of those and creating an environment both outwardly and inwardly that serves us in accomplishing our goals. From there, I think it's beliefs, like getting really clear about what our beliefs are, and breaking through limiting beliefs, where that opens up a pretty clear vision, where we start creating alignment around like the why and our beliefs and our vision, tying those to our target as well. Like, what are we actually striving for? And then from there, lining up our habits around it, and then having a community and a success team that supports that success, whether it's in business or in a different area of life.
And it's so true. Go ahead.
No, I think one of the challenges with personal development is actually thinking about accurately what personal development is, because I think it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and there's a lot of different self-help books and different ideas around it. But if we can't think accurately about what personal development is, usually what I see is that there's some sort of bottleneck that's created around it. And that's usually at the belief layer or the identity layer, trigger processing. And then what I've been fascinated by is you mentioned the amount of entrepreneurs that we've worked with over time. I would say, and we create a space for them to bring opportunities and challenges to the table to get support around those, and even get challenged around them. And what I see is 80 to 90% of the time, the problem that people think they have is not their actual problem. That if we actually drill into that problem, there's something deeper. There's, first principles, root cause. There's a lot of terms that get thrown around about how to solve problems now, but it's one of those things that I think is very difficult to do individually in the ivory tower, if we're just sitting there like thinking about it. I think it can be possible if someone's intelligent and aware enough. But what I see is coaches, mentors, masterminds being really pivotal to helping people see maybe what they don't see, the unknown, and also what they know that isn't so. So some people have these really strong beliefs that sometimes aren't, like beliefs about what the problem that they think exists, what the bottleneck they think it is. And a lot of times I think that that's not true. And once we can shine a light on what the real problem is, people often can solve that on themselves, like for themselves.
Yeah. Having that objective, I guess, perspective is always
Sounding
so
board.
helpful. Yeah, right. That's, to me, that's the whole point of the coaching, is not really to solve the problem for you, but to shine that light so that you can see it to solve yourself.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to one of your questions about what do entrepreneurs do, like successful entrepreneurs do differently, is that they solve their own problems.
Yeah.
They're not looking for someone to solve their problems. They may hire someone, but that's them solving a problem as well. It's just delegating that. So,
and that's a big thing right there. A lot of entrepreneurs have this whole thing, well, I can do it better myself. And then they create a problem because the thing that they should be focusing on is not being attended to, because they're focusing on things that they should have delegated away.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times a simple Google search could help someone solve their own problem, but they're looking, they'll hire a coach or a mentor. I remember meeting with a mentor once. He's like, let me Google that for you. And I was so embarrassed, right? Where it's like, I could Google that for myself.
Could have done it yourself.
Yeah. And he stopped meeting with me shortly after that, and looking back on it, it's pretty clear why. But I think that masterminds, like the business that I'm in, the kind of the way that I think about it now is that a mastermind is relevant for someone when their problems are no longer Googleable. And I think for most people in the world, their problems are Googleable.
Yeah. Kind of goes back to, though, to having that community. Sometimes the community can also be a source, just like your Google.
Yeah. And I think from a Maslow's hierarchy of needs perspective, a community is a more basic need than success. And so if people don't have a community that supports that purpose, that mission, that success, that journey, I self-sabotaged a few times in my life, because I just, I would have lost the acceptance and the connection from the people around me if I continued on the path that I was on. And so, I think that's why community is such a base level thing. And we need to have a community that supports that growth, that evolution, that success, because otherwise I think people will continue to self-sabotage.
Yeah, so true. Time is flying by. We'll have to have you back because I have other questions I'd love to get to. But how do you manage noise in life?
I think the simple answer is to shut it off,
Yeah.
And it goes back to, I think, reflecting and planning. It's, for me, every week I reflect on the week and plan the next week. And if I didn't get what I said I was going to get done, it's like, well, why did I not get it done? And it's like, well, because you watched YouTube for, 2 hours that day. And so I think learning to shut off that noise, there's a demand for attention with all the things that are going on in the world. And, it's like, oh, we're on the brink of thermonuclear war and climate crises and just all these things where it's just like, oh my gosh, like, does what I'm doing like matter? And it's like, now I'm 37. And so I've been able to see this for decades now. And, just to think about what the incentives are, right? Like what, show me the incentives and I'll show you the behaviors and people, that get paid from our attention, they have the incentive to get our attention by any means, and blood cells and fear cells and sex cells, right? And so these just really strong dopamine activities like that gets our attention, and then they are able to sell ads because of it, or subscriptions, or whatever it is. So I think we need to really understand what people incentives are and how that impacts us. And buyer beware, right? Like, and buyer is like financial as well as time. Where are we investing our energy, and what are we getting back for that? And often most problems can be solved in an individual's life if they just go into a quiet room for 6 to 12 months and deal with their own stuff. And once we do that, then we can have a bigger impact on the world around us.
For sure.
I think most people are more comfortable trying to solve other people's problems than they are trying to solve their own problems.
So true. And it really, as you were talking, it really had me go back to personal development. For me, one of my mentors is Jim Olson, who wrote The Slight Edge, and he talks about having either 10 pages of a book that's going to help you grow, or a podcast or something where you spend just that time, 30, 40 minutes or whatever, just for you. Just develop your brain, and that quietness of that act of reading I love, but just, to me, that's where self-care starts, is with your head, with your brain. And then you start to solve problems because you took your mind off the problem.
Yeah. Self-care is an interesting part of the self-love journey, the awareness journey, and learning to, like, for me, ask myself, what is it that I need right now? Like, what it's not something that school taught me.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to do is I work with middle school and high schoolers, teaching them how to find their voice. But in that, you drop those little things about self-care, self-esteem, self-confidence, and that their worth. A lot of kids today just don't understand how much how to value their being.
I think one of the tricks with it, Vicki, I think it was like a movie, Finding Forrester. One of my favorite lines of that movie was, the rest of those that came before us cannot steady the unrest of those that follow. And so this idea of, like, peace is not transferable. Like, at a certain point, experiences we can have in life, we learn something, but we can't give that to someone in words, unfortunately. Or, I think every parent would really appreciate that ability. And so I think one of the challenges with the current education landscape and just the social structure that is, going to adulthood, is that, at least in my experience, it's been experiences where I really learned the lesson. It's not from the book. It's not from someone telling me something. It's, I love hearing Steve Jobs, Stanford's commencement address, but those words, like, didn't help me really get it. I had to go through some experiences in life to really get it. So I encourage people to experience more things. I'm currently traveling the world with my wife, and I've lived in San Diego, California for 36 years. And this year has been the longest amount of time I've spent out of that city, out of, my comfort zone. And I have learned so much, experienced so much, evolved so much. And there's a lot of things that I've been wanting to do for a long time that I've been able to do over a 6 to 9 month period by just creating some space and getting out of my comfort zone and breaking the routines and kind of the normal flow that I was in.
Yeah. I think that's why I loved volunteering all my life, because it exposed me to so many different experiences, people, and situations that really broadened your perspective, but also strengthened what your core values needed to be.
Yeah, and there's a gift from contributing to other people, like through a nonprofit or that type of civic engagement. I see it in a mastermind environment a lot, where when one person teaches, they get as much out of that as the person that they're teaching. So I think there's something really inherent in the human spirit, and probably just even in our DNA, of wanting to pass on that knowledge.
Yeah.
So I would like to see an opportunity in society for that to happen on a larger scale, where, maybe rather than paying people once they retire to not do anything, we give them the opportunity to go back into the education system and teach their life wisdom to young people. And I think that they would benefit from that. The younger people would benefit from that, and society as a whole could do a better job of connecting those resources and still supporting older people as they got older, but then benefiting the younger generations by sharing those experiences and that wisdom in a more effective and efficient way.
Yep. As a person who's 65 and given back, yes, that's exactly what you do. Life experiences. But it also, I think, keeps we seasoned people feeling younger, because there's purpose. I think a lot of people that retire lose purpose, and then their lives don't go on as long as they might have liked because they lost that purpose.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
All right. Well, if you've enjoyed this chat as much as I have with Parker, I'm going to share my screen with his contact information. I do encourage you all to, if you are just listening in, to grab a paper and pencil so that you can write down the website information, but it will be on my findyourleadershipconfidence.com website or my YouTube Vicki Noethling channel. And the website is https:// Junto, Junto.global. And Facebook, he's Zachary Parker Harris. LinkedIn, he's Zachary Parker Harris. And Instagram, Zachary Parker Harris. You can thank him in an email later for having the same for all those social media. And I'll let Parker talk to you about what you can find whenever you go to junto.global.
Thank you, Vicki. Junto Global is our mastermind community. So for entrepreneurs that are at a certain point in their journey where their problems are no longer Googleable, it's a place where you can meet with like-minded people who will support and challenge you to think bigger, identify that bottleneck, and break through it.
Awesome. So Parker, I enjoyed so much hearing all of your great advice and insights. It was wonderful to really hear what successful entrepreneurs do differently. And I encourage everyone to go to junto.global so that you can connect with Parker and continue the conversation. As always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.